Lou, thank you so much for hanging out with me today for a little bit. We'll just ad lib as we go here. But first off, can you just tell us a little bit bio on your background, Lou? I know you're a football player. You were a lineman, weren't you?
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I was a lineman in college, Division three school in northern New Jersey, William Patterson. I was about as wide as I'm tall, which is pretty wide, but not very tall. So
What are you,
I kind
six
of
foot? Well, I think you're
yeah,
6 foot. Well, or
about six
Lou.
foot. I got 6 foot, and once I throw the stilts on, I stand probably a whopping 5'6" and change.
Okay.
And I capped out at about 235 in undergrad, so not too bad for a guy that's about 5'6". But started my kind of pathway into strength and conditioning at that point. Realized that I was better in the weight room than I was um,
Uh,
on the football field,
yeah.
and saw as my pathway and staying involved in athletics was being a resource for others that I didn't necessarily have for myself, coming from a small school with limited resources.
Cool. No, you trimmed down. You look awesome, Lou. Like, dude,
Nice.
how'd you cut all
Appreciate
that
it.
weight? That's
Yeah,
awesome. The
it's
last
just
time I
better
saw
better
you,
lifestyle choices. Better lifestyle choices, you know?
yeah. Well, you see that a lot. I do. You get all these linemen, like even in the NFL, right? I You see them later, and they're all trimmed down and lean, and it's like you're playing at 250. Wow,
Yeah,
it's
heck yeah. I
crazy.
mean, Joe Thomas is a Hall of Famer and a
Yeah.
big dude, but he looks great. And it looks like if you told me today that he was a tight end in the NFL and I didn't know who he was, I believe it because he's dropped probably 50, 60 pounds and he'll be a Hall of Famer in a couple of years.
Oh,
Once he hits that threshold, you see it a bunch, right? A lot of guys are just tired of being as big as they are. Granted, they're about a foot taller than me, some of them, but
right.
at some point you just kind of get tired of eating to be as big as you can,
Sure.
and some of the just
Calorie intake,
general,
right?
exactly, some of the lethargy that comes with that. And it's nice to not get super winded climbing up a flight of stairs
Right.
uh, and carrying around all that extra weight, especially for me through my midsection, but it's a different topic.
Right. But yeah, you guys are all hooked up because you have nutrition, right? That's right in the same room, isn't it? Or is that right out the front
Yeah,
doors there?
just outside the window is our performance nutrition team and our fueling station. Primarily for student athletes, but every so often, if there's some excess smoothies or what have you, then we have a good enough relationship for them to be kind and offer some indulgent for us.
Right. All this extra Louis, all this. No, I'm not playing lineman anymore.
It's true. And another fun fact: I was a champion competitive eater in undergrad.
Really?
Yep,
So like
yep.
that hot dog eating thing that was on ESPN the other week, you could have done that.
Kind of. Yeah, I've always thought my limit's around 40 hot dogs and buns, but it's a
Oh
natural
wow.
ability for me. Yeah, yeah. Impressive, I know. And it's okay.
That
My
is.
last
That's,
contest was 2011. I ate 2 pounds 11.5 ounces of tater tot in 6 minutes.
oh
So
my
proud,
God.
proud. My family
You,
incredibly proud of me.
you knew that one dude on that Food Network was retiring
It's
from the show. What was
Yeah,
his
it's
name?
true.
Andy? No, I can't remember his name.
Adam.
Adam, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of
That's
his
too
last
funny.
name, but he actually was on campus my second year here. So we met him, and
Oh,
he did Mountain on Cheesemo at a Mexican place around here.
oh really?
Trevor's getting a kick out of all this.
Is he? He's
Uh,
leaving. He's like,
yeah,
this is I'm out of here.
I
I'm
gotta
going
go.
to the pool.
Um, but yeah, it's a natural ability for me, and it helped in undergrad. Obviously, eating as many calories as I was eating, I just had a huge capacity. So
Sure. High
I don't do it
metabolism,
anymore. Yeah,
right?
well, something.
That's too good. That's awesome. Okay, into the little more serious stuff. Your role at Michigan, Lou.
Mhm.
Tell us specifically what your role is, and then how you attain that.
Yeah. So currently, I serve as the assistant director of strength and conditioning for Olympic sports. Our director and my boss, Mike Favor, has been my boss since before I even started at Michigan. He was my boss at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, where I was an
Sure.
intern in 2009. When he took the job here as director of strength and conditioning, shortly after I had left that internship, he offered me a GA position, and that was August of 2009. And so about 15 years ago is when that journey at Michigan started for each of us, about a month apart. And so I owe a lot of my success to Mike in a lot of different ways. So over the course of that 15 or so years, I completed my master's degree at Eastern Michigan, just right down the road from us. Was hired on
Mhm.
as a full-time assistant and then promoted a couple times to my current role of assistant director, where I directly support Mike and the rest of our Olympic sport strength and conditioning staff, and making sure
Mhm.
that we provide high class service and top notch service to our student athletes and teams. And then I make sure that I manage effectively our facilities and our budget, and work with fiscal prudence and responsibility to ensure that we function smoothly.
Nice. Okay, yeah, because there's like 10, and
Yep.
Trevor's one of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. We've got there's 12 of us, and so
Oh,
it's
it's 12. Okay.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
with Mike.
12 of
Okay.
us. Yeah. So it's a large staff, and so it's important that that I'm available for Mike to lean on, and I can lean on him. So we have I think a really effective and harmonious relationship, and it's taken time to get there for sure. I think to build a trust both ways, for us to function as we have, but certainly it's built on a really deep foundation of mutual respect,
Sure.
for people that are just good at their craft and downright decent humans.
Right. That's awesome. No, that's perfect. She's that long, right? I mean, it's either works really well or it doesn't probably, and you probably figure that out after 3, 4 years, and it's been
Sure.
15, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
heck yeah. Yeah, it's been a great run, and it'll continue to be until something happens, until
right,
life goes on, and
right,
one of us retires or or what
right.
have you. But I think
Sure.
one of the things I've learned from him, and I really have started to preach this message more and more, is bloom where you're planted, and remember that the grass is green where you water it. And I
That's
can I can
awesome.
look over
That's a
to my
really good
neighbor's
statement.
yard, look to my neighbor's yard and realize he's got better grass and try and buy his house. But if I buy his house and pay a premium and then I don't take care of the grass, it's gonna turn into the same grass I got across the street.
Right? You're right. Dude, it's just, yeah, how you present yourself and how you carry yourself and how you organize what you do and why you do it.
Sure, heck yeah, spot on right there.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that leads right into the next thing. Like, okay, philosophy. Like, what's your philosophy? And you and Mike put together obviously a plan and said, here's what we're going to make Michigan about. You know what I mean? There's basic concepts, but what did you guys do when you came in to kind of make it your own and feel like, okay, this is the foundation that we can build on with not only the staff you have, but all the athletes that are coming in and working with you. You know, there's a lot of different ways to use the room, right? And how did you guys get it organized in your mind and put it together to say, hey, this is what we're going to build on, so every athlete that comes through here knows this is our philosophy, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a tricky question, right? We support 30 teams here at Michigan, and so
Right.
there's a lot of different body types and different physiological demands for each of them. And then within the given sport, there's even smaller nuances and finer nuances that you need to pay attention to. So I think broadly, it's important to have kind of a root foundation in philosophy. So without reading it verbatim in front of me,
Right.
we believe in ground-based multi-joint movements and energy system specific development for sport, and relative to the demands of their sport, and enhancing the qualities and traits that are necessary for them to have the opportunity for success. Right? We don't necessarily dictate wins and losses in any sense of the imagination. We help
Sure.
prepare people to be as physically robust and durable as possible, so that their ability is available. Right? That's the best ability, is their availability. And so through the use of predominantly ground-based multi-joint movements and sport-specific energy system development, we start to hone in on the finer points of each of our respective sports, and then positionally pay attention to kind of the finer dynamics that are important within a given sport. There's differences between forwards and goalies, or pitchers and catchers, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So I think diving in and embedding ourselves with those respective sports is important as well.
Okay, so you do a mix kind of. So you still do your base core lifts, but then you mix in other parts to get more specific based on sport and on position, basically, right?
Sure. Yeah, and then just the individuals themselves, right? I'd love to say we
Sure.
live in a perfect world and that everyone that walks through our doors is perfectly healthy and has never had an injury or an illness that has set them back. But I don't live in Narnia. I realize that we don't live in this perfect utopian society where people walk in with no injury or illness history. We recognize that we have to meet people where they are, and so the other side to all of that is almost separate from the demands of their sport and what the needs of their positions are specifically. What does their current ability look like? Do they have any
Sure.
setbacks that require us to think more creatively and treat them truly more as a human than somebody that plays a certain position, right? If somebody had an L4 L5 fusion at some point and we start to do some heavy axial loading without any understanding of what L4 L5 fusion looks like, there's a certain level of irresponsibility on our end that comes with that. So we work really
Sure.
effectively with our sports medicine team and our athletic trainers specifically to ensure that we leave no stone left unturned, and again try and provide world-class resources to the people that we service, our student athletes and our coaches.
Sure. That makes sense. How is there any standardized basic screening that you guys use, Lou, when the freshmen come in every sport? I mean, you can have them go checked out by the doc, right? But is there anything in your room where you're like, hey, here's, you know, any type of functional
Uh,
movement screening stuff, or do you guys, how do you kind of
yeah,
gauge a baseline?
yeah, it's an interesting question. I think uh, all of us, so obviously all our student athletes go through their pre-participation exam before they start any
Gotcha.
activity with us, and that includes all of our returners on an annual basis. Again, led by our sports med team, and so it's really kind of dependent on the dynamic between respective strength and conditioning coaches and the athletic trainer and how we go through
Sure.
assessments. There are some, again, the finer nuances of sport that warrant different assessments. I think forcing everyone into the same umbrella of FMS or any other
Sure.
specific assessment um, is not the most effective use of time with the number of student athletes we have and the amount of staff we
Totally.
have. And so, uh, honestly, it's a lot of regular assessment and engaging with our student athletes on a regular basis. There's benefits to being at practice. There's benefits to seeing how they move and function just through a basic dynamic warm up and how they play within their
Sure.
sport and how they respond to coaching. And then you start to learn some kind of commonalities or tendencies sport to sport and positionally over time, that put you on a little bit more high alert for certain potential injury risks or scenarios where we might need to take a proactive intervention versus reactively waiting until something negative occurs. There's
Sure.
no way to 100% hit the mark on all of that, but I think regular and consistent assessment and evaluation every day that somebody walks in the weight room for a training session is a chance to assess and evaluate and adjust as we need to, whether that's through
Sure.
the use of velocity-based training, whether it's through a set series of assessments, assessing internal, external rotation of the hip or shoulder, or what have you.
Sure.
So there's a lot of different ways to go about it. It's hard to say that this is
Right.
what we do for every single person.
Sure. Oh, that's a yeah, to simplify it, right, Lou? I mean, basically it's okay, you take their word when they come in, right? Because they fill out the forms and the doc checks them out. And then it's
Mhm.
just an on to keep it simple, right? It's just an ongoing assessment. Their stressors are X and you know what those are based on what sport you're in charge of, or right. And you that's what you're looking at. So it's just an ongoing, which makes a ton of sense. Cause yeah, that's why I asked, because it's like, I mean, can is there systems out there where people just go in, oh, here's your test. Okay, here's what you are, here's where you go, and it's like I didn't think that was the case with Michigan, of course, but I just wanted to see how it
Sure.
related, because all this leads up to kind of the stuff I really want to get into kind of with our piece of the systems and performance devices and cord systems and how you integrate that. I mean, because at the end of the day, my goal, as I told you before, Lou, is on this whole thing with Performex, our total goal is using you guys as thought leaders to give us some good tips and ideas on how you integrate it, when you program it, what's effective for that. And we really want to put that together and help, other coaches. In your case, if you're doing what men, are you still men's soccer, women's gymnastics, softball,
Mhm.
right?
Yep, yep,
And
those are
and
my three.
so yeah, so in those, it's like, hey, these women's softball coaches at these high schools, it would just be great, to know, hey, yeah, they're probably still squatting and benching and doing core lifts with you. How are you integrating these systems into, female sports, women's sports? Because we see it a lot at the high school level where the football coach is making the total decision on the weight room. And most of the time they're filling it up with squat racks, which that's great because they want more stations. I understand that. But how can we augment that and add, devices like ours that can offer, additional types of training where you can still make gains, but you just don't have to bulk up so much. Especially we hear these girls in high school like, I don't want big hips, and how do we do that? And our systems we've found in high schools just really help accommodate that, that room can become more than just a place where you're always worrying about squatting and benching.
Yeah, yeah, I think all of that really speaks to the versatility of our space and what the idea behind our space, our all of our spaces are, but specifically our main Olympic sports weight room at the Sports Performance Center, which is now 6.5, 7 years old,
Sure.
and still in great shape, and a place that we utilize a ton for a large majority of our student athletes. It's important that, and I have this conversation on any kind of recruiting tours that I give for prospective student athletes. Have the conversation with any guests or visitors, whether they're vendors or colleagues that come in from around the country or around the world. It's important that we can adapt and adjust the space, which is phenomenal space, but still has its limits, as any physical space does. We can adjust and adapt it for every person that comes through here, whether that's some of my women's gymnasts that are 4'10" or 4'11", or some of
Sure.
our throwers that are 6'7". Right, there's darn near a 2 foot difference, and then everyone between that, typically, that come through
Right.
our doors, and they have drastically different needs in terms of the stimulus necessary for them to elicit the response that will help benefit them in preparing for their sport. And so the ability to do so effectively and seamlessly is really valuable. And that, excuse me, that certainly includes PerformX, not only on all of our platforms, all 40 platforms and racks that we have, but additional wall stations on the turf level, for some speed, agility, quickness, or horizontal plyos, or a bit of upper body preparation work as needed. So for us, it's having the option to utilize different pieces of equipment, different space and footprint, and when it's not in use, not have it be cumbersome and in the way and limiting to what we're trying to accomplish. So performance hits the marks on that, right? It's built into the ground. The only thing that happens is that every once in a while we have to vacuum it out because sometimes dust and chalk and grime and turf pellets get in there, and so we just make sure we upkeep it the way we do any of our other pieces of equipment, because that's frankly what it is a piece of equipment. We upkeep it just the way we do any other equipment, or any piece of any piece of product that we have in our spaces, and then put it to use when it's in need, and when it's not, we barely even think about it being there, which is really a benefit for us, is that it gives us some room for creative thought beyond just the primary lifts, right? You talk about, people, generally speaking, when you talk about the primary lifts, they think about the powerlifting movements, squat, bench, deadlift, and their variations: front squat, RDLs, trap bar deadlifts, bench press, incline bench press, so on and so forth. And so again, for us, it's the creativity around those primary lifts, those powerlifting movements, which certainly make up a reasonable amount of what we offer to our student athletes. Their derivatives, and then other exercises that benefit from accommodating resistance. Right. I think one of the best examples I have of that is something that you and I chatted about probably a year or two into us being in this room. Was using the jump cords for glute bridges, just cross across the platform and kind
Sure.
of hook to each other, and then slide yourself underneath, like one of our student athletes described it best, like you're trying to tuck yourself into some hotel sheets with how much you have to pull on the hotel sheets to slide under.
Right.
And then once they're in, they're in a position where there's band resistance across their hips, and they can do double leg glute bridge, single leg glute bridge, some side lying hip work, or some side plank variations with that, and then they
Sure.
untuck themselves and move on to the next movement, right? So it's some small creativity along those lines, that beyond just how you've designed the products to function with a traditional barbell or specialty bars. We get creative and use it in as many ways as we can think of.
Sure. What on that note, Lou, on accommodating resistance on programming that, I mean, what's your philosophy on that on how you integrate it in a smart manner, to a program?
Yeah, I think there's two ways I think we've primarily integrated it. Um, the first way for me, that I tend to lean on quite a bit is, as we get into our in season period, in terms of providing some stimulus of a heavier load at the top of the squat, right? A little more CNS activation to feel something heavy, but it adjusts as you sit through that full range of motion. And so at the bottom, conceptually, the chords provide the least amount of resistance, and therefore it's the lightest load you have. And
Sure.
then as you stand up out of the bottom, the tension builds. And so the CNS stimulation there is beneficial, especially as we look to maintain strength gains, but minimize and mitigate the amount of excess fatigue that occurs, especially as we get deeper in the season. So it's one great way to use it, and that I found success with. The other way that we've incorporated is, in addition to our VBT, as a means of ensuring that bar stays in a little bit more effective positioning for our student athletes, as they're trying to push certain velocity ranges, especially higher end velocity. Um, the last thing you want is somebody doing a yoke bar squat or a yoke bar split squat, and the bar is jumping around on their back, because they're trying to move it with a certain velo, and so the
Sure.
bands kind of pull the bar into place, plus add some additional resistance that they need to overcome as they stand up out of the bottom of that movement pattern. And so we found success with that, and frankly, keeping the bar in position um, through various movements where we're tracking their power outputs using our
Right.
VBT system.
Okay. Oh, that's what you guys have for bar speed and measuring movement,
Yeah,
velocity movement. Yeah.
yeah. We'll use currently we're using GymAware, and always looking to assess what's out there, what makes the most sense. But it
Mhm.
helps keep the bar in the right position so that people can move confidently without concern of how the bar is going to feel jumping around on their back.
Right. Gotcha. And then you're tracking that. So this goes back to assessment almost, right? I mean, you can see what they do with what weight and our with our chords having, basic understanding of what the poundage is. You guys can determine bar speed, right? And then track that and
Yep.
how
Yep.
quickly they can move weight. Does that play a lot into your workouts, Lou? Like measuring bar speed to get to a certain point? And have you made norms on that at all in
Yeah.
movement?
S- So amongst our staff, I think we've used it in varying capacities. So we have just over 20 gym owner units for across our 5 weight rooms,
Okay.
76 total racks. And so 20 something gym aware and 76 racks don't quite add up to a 1-to-1. And
Right.
so it's sometimes situationally dependent in terms of how they get divvied up, and who has access to them based on our schedule, time of year, and so on.
Sure.
And so it's hard to say that that's something that's an all the time thing. Although I think there's room for it to be more, I guess, utilized more consistently. It would require
Mhm.
investment in more units in that standpoint. At that point, I do think that it'd be used on a more consistent basis throughout the course of the year. There's no reason why it can't be incorporated in a non-intrusive manner for a vast majority of the year, if for no other reason but familiarity with the system, so that when we really do want to focus on hitting certain velocities, there's familiarity with how to accomplish that beyond just the
Sure.
concept of move the weight faster. Not to mention, even during a max strength training cycle, with having the numbers in front of me, which I won't make up numbers because
Right.
I don't love that, but in a max training cycle, we know that there's certain velocity kind of thresholds that will
Sure.
help us dictate what an appropriate 1RM load might be.
Sure.
If somebody is close to what that threshold is, what's the purpose of putting 5 more pounds in the bar to try to get them to lift a weight that's 5 pounds heavier than they just did, when the velocity that they move that weight at is essentially the threshold where anything slower is likely a missed lift.
Right.
So even during a point when velocity and power bits aren't particularly important, they can provide some really good feedback.
Sure. No, it's a good, almost more safe way to gauge where you're at, and then, or it can be, right? Because then you don't have to
Yeah.
increase the weight, like you're saying, right? I mean, then you could
Yeah.
just look at the data and go, okay, you're moving the weight faster, so obviously it's stronger. So maybe the next time we can up the weight based on the progressiveness of it. Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. If I squat 315 a day at 0.4, and in 3 weeks I squat 315 at 0.45, I have improved. And although it's
Right,
the same weight, I've moved the same way faster. And that's a step in the right direction.
right. Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I see why that all happens. So now tell me this, Lily, on all your how do you program your blocks? Like say take volleyball, like in the off season. So right now it's kind of preseason, right? This whole summer because or it's already
Yeah. If
over
you're,
probably. You're into
well, if you're
Yeah,
looking
how do
at
you
sport
block
level,
it?
so it is all sport dependent, right? So you just mentioned volleyball. Volleyball's a fall sport for us. So they're probably 4 or 5 weeks away from their competitive periods. It's all kind of
Sure,
dependent. And so I think when I talk about this, and I typically lead a conversation or inter-education session around programming, and I say look at the year as a whole, and then work backwards
sure,
from whatever the end date is, and then from there factor in the known pieces of the calendar. That's the not only the end of the season, start of the season. It's the start of the preseason period when they really move into their full 20-hour a week NCAA allotted practice slots. It's
sure.
any institutional breaks, winter break, fall break, Thanksgiving, so on and so forth, and factoring those into the equation. And then what are their 8-hour periods where there's reduced time but still countable hours, and then what's voluntary, and then start to work from there. So, for instance, for me right now with softball, based on when our season ended and when we start classes,
Oh
there
yeah, softball.
is there's 12 total weeks of summer training that we have access to. Now, all of that is voluntary, but I build out 12 weeks worth of training um, based on, again, when the season ended, when classes start. And for me, that's broken
Gotcha.
up into 3 different training cycles. As
Okay.
we get into as we get into the fall semester, it'll be 2 training cycles before we hit our fall break period, and then another training cycle before we hit Thanksgiving break, and another one
Good.
between Thanksgiving break and when we start classes in January. So all of these things
Gotcha.
I know because I'm so familiar with the softball schedule, but it's
Sure.
anywhere from really 3 to 6 weeks, and depending on a variety of those different factors in our calendars.
Right. And you say voluntary. And then there's time limits though too, right? That you guys can spend as coaches because you're deemed like coaches by the NCAA, right? Is that how it works? That
Yeah.
you only have,
Yeah.
people think you have unlimited time, right? Oh, they finish in December. We should just be able to train from January, or not December. They finish in like May, right? I mean, for softball. And so then it's like, oh, can we just go but you don't really have that much time when you factor in, like you said, you got to work it backwards, right? You got to look at the calendar, look at the scheduling. And so you
Yeah.
really find out, and then it narrows down all the windows that you have, right?
Sure. Yeah. And it's right there. Effectively, there's 3 different time periods for our sports. Voluntary, which means that nobody can require them. There's no hours that can be counted. There's no true mechanism to hold somebody fully accountable.
Sure.
If somebody doesn't show up, there's nothing that I can do about that. And that's a voluntary period. The 8-hour period allots for 4 hours of skill instruction with the coaches and 4 hours with me for strength and conditioning. If they
Sure.
opt for less than 4 hours of skill development, conceptually that gives me more time, but typically they'll opt
Gotcha.
for 4 and 4. So for me, that's 3 1-hour lifts and then 30-minute sessions on field for a little bit of speed, agility, quickness, and
Okay.
conditioning, which makes sense for softball for sure,
Sure.
but maybe not for some other sports. And then a 20-hour period where they have 20 hours up to 6 days a week. Our compliance team is going to love that I can rattle all this off, and I know it. But even during that 20-hour
That's good.
period, I'm typically allotted 3 or 4 hours a week over the course of multiple days for us to train, and they'll push close to the end of that 20 hours. And so it's important
Sure.
for me to keep things buttoned up and kind of locked in on time. Our summer workouts can be rather lengthy at times. It's start of their off season. It's a lot of volume. It's tough work. There are no hour restrictions, although everything is voluntary. So if a workout takes an hour and 25 minutes instead of 60 minutes flat,
Right.
that's fine. But also, they might choose to not be here for whatever reason. They choose
Sure.
to take vacation or go home or
But
move their
you
lift
find
to a
it, Lou,
different
right?
day.
I mean, you build the right camaraderie about it. You probably don't see many not, they'll tell you probably, right? Hey, I got this coming
Yeah,
up, and then you adjust accordingly for them specifically. I'm
no
going home for
doubt,
a week.
no
Here's
doubt,
your thing, right?
no doubt. All right, this is a
Because they want to
relationship
be there.
business,
They
right?
want to win, right?
Right. And my message is always this. I make it explicitly clear that what voluntary means. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no in between. There's no gray area for me. It's
Sure.
voluntary. What's not voluntary is respecting my time and respecting the time of your teammates. What's not voluntary is your willingness to commit to yourself and to the program that you are part of and the team that you play with. That's not voluntary. Everything that you're doing, frankly, is voluntary. I voluntarily woke up today. I voluntarily drove myself to the weight room. I
Right.
voluntarily worked with all the student athletes that showed up, and I voluntarily got on this call with you. Nobody's making me do that. Now, if I didn't do those things, most of those things, there's a chance I get reprimanded, and there's
Right.
repercussions and
Sure.
potentially negative consequences if I choose to do something different. But I chose to
Right.
do what I just described. I chose to do today,
Sure.
and so every day it's an active and conscious choice to meet the expectations of what you signed up for. And if that no longer matches with what you want for yourself, that's okay. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with that,
Right.
but you need to take a close hard look at whether or not you are willing and able to continue in the direction you're heading, or if you need to do something different, either recommit to what you're doing or decommit in some ways and
Right.
do something slightly different for yourself, your own wellness, your mental health, your physical health, right? And it's inspiring and empowering people to be the best version of themselves and to be a resource for them as they choose to make the decision themselves. I keep it really simple. I've never had a horse, but I've heard that you can lead a horse to water and you can't make him drink. And so I refuse to bury somebody's head in the trough and say drink, because all that horse is going to do is fight back and rear back and probably kick you in the stomach and then
Right.
run off and do their own thing. So my job every day, I wake up trying to figure out how to make that horse thirsty so that they choose to drink for themselves and they find self-sufficiency and they're empowered to take action for themselves to contribute to the betterment of the team and the program they're a part of. It's as simple as that. And
Oh, that's awesome.
it's
Is that
there's
on
a
a
lot of
TV
different ways to
commercial
get
for
there.
Michigan, Lou? I mean,
Yeah, come on, let's go. Let's rock and roll. Let's get it up somewhere.
dude, that's awesome. I mean, that's just a great philosophy in general for life. Really, it is though, and it's like, and it's why you're at Michigan. It's why you belong there. It's what you're doing there. And you could believe this somewhere else, of course, and you will. If you choose to take a different path, it's not going to change who you are, most likely, because this is what you've
Yeah, yeah,
chosen to do, which is awesome.
yeah.
That's
Appreciate
cool.
appreciate that.
That's, no, it's really good. That's really good. Okay, cool. I know we kind of are skipping around. I'm getting more in your head of your philosophy and your programming than, so much about our stuff. But that's why I wanted to just try this, Lou. I wanted to see where we're at and how you guys incorporate our systems. And I know it can't just be all about our stuff, but I watch some of these podcasts and they have stories and good stories, like we're saying, and a lot of these life lessons and things build into what you're trying to do. We've talked about this about Performex. We really strive to be like, I want to be a little more professional than some of our counterparts and make sure we're having good conversation that's meaningful, that's usable, that's something we can integrate with more people, across the board. And a lot of this is integrity based and on what you said on how you act and how you respond to things. and then, just what do you do in your, everyday life, and it's mental as much as it is, physical a lot of the times, to really
Yeah, yeah,
understand how you want to carry yourself, Um,
sure, yeah.
so yeah, we kind of went through any good success stories, Lou, where you really see some of your coaches embracing the court systems to work with specific teams that you're like, hey, that's really helpful. And I know Jason's really hot on our stuff, a lot, and he uses as much as he can for lacrosse, tennis, baseball when he was doing it,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
he's always trying to
yeah. It's
incorporate.
I think the versatile piece of the again, I mentioned this in terms of the versatility of it. For us, the upstairs turf level, we have about 35 yard strip of turf. It's about 13, 14 yards wide.
Mhm.
And the way the tracks are laid out allows us to use that width, which isn't a tremendously large space. But the
Sure,
cores allow us with the track on the wall to get creative with some of the SAQ work that we can do. And so it's typically tight spaces where the band is either providing under or over speed, depending on the direction you're moving.
sure.
And the benefit of the what I call the 359-degree belt is that it allows you to kind of swivel and pivot kind of seamlessly, and get truly multi-directional in terms of resistance or assistance through different movement patterns, shuffling, backpedaling, short accelerations and short decelerations. And so for us, it takes a space that isn't tremendously large, especially in the width, and be able to more effectively utilize that. And I've done that quite a bit over the years with personally with myself with men's soccer, and then a lot of our
For
other
sure.
field sports will use it for that purpose. Whether it's small groups up there, and maybe it's again we kind of alluded to this. Maybe it's positionally specific, or it's the full team going through it because they can all benefit from some speed, agility, quickness work using the Performx cords mounted vertically on the wall. And again, when they're not in use, they're just there and on the wall and non-invasive in
Sure.
any sense of the imagination. So I think several of our field sport teams have benefited from those systems so much that we're looking into a turf room that we have in the basement that is in our building,
Okay.
not specifically under the purview of strength and conditioning, but um, within the building that we live in a room that's used largely by both men's and women's soccer and men's and women's lacrosse, putting some of the wall mounted units in for individual and small group work, not only for student athletes to use on their own or with us, but also with coaches to go through some maybe specific drill work that they might be able to benefit from some over or under speed work from.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense. That's great. Yeah, no, you have a good combination of both systems, where you're able to incorporate it into your strength and conditioning side, and then you're able to incorporate it into your functional agility movement based drills as well. So, no, that's great. No, thanks.
Yeah, it's
Well,
been
that's awesome, Lou.
been a great piece. The belts make it really convenient as well for us. It's nice to be able to kind of seamlessly pivot and move versus feeling like you're kind of stuck in a singular movement pattern or plane of motion.
Sure. Nice. Okay. How about some advice to any of these high school coaches on integrating some of our stuff? I mean, you've talked a lot about, and a lot of the pieces you've said, Lou, can be filtered into that. But like a soccer coach or a softball coach, what are some, you know,
Yeah, I think it's important to once you understand how the system works and the basics of it and how seamless it is to incorporate for some of the kind of foundational movements. Don't be afraid to get creative. Think outside the proverbial box. Understand what might be beneficial for a given sport and how band assistance or resistance or chord resistance or assistance can benefit and enhance those movement patterns that might be a little bit more directly applicable to their sport. And then use different pieces, right? I've used some other equipment along with the Performx cords, the jump cord especially, because it's just a carabiner at the end, to go through some like pelvic trunk and excuse me, hip and trunk dissociation, where the pelvis stays stationary and the trunk rotates, or the pelvis moves and the trunk stays stationary, with some other straps that kind of help create tension once they're hooked into the Performix, right? I don't know that if I go on your website or any of your social media channels, you'll see anything specific like that, because it's not necessarily what the product was designed for, but it's totally an appropriate use for it,
Sure.
for sports that do benefit from um, hip and trunk dissociation work, right? Golf is a great example.
Hmm.
You need to be able to create rotation from the lower half and have it transfer to the upper half, much like baseball or softball, other sports that require rotation. And so using the system outside of the box and using other implements that you have access to, allows you to, again, to get a little bit more creative with what it is you're offering your student athletes for a more holistic based program.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. Well, thanks, Lou. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I think that's good on all of our details.